Healthcare facilities across the continent face shortages of basic medical supplies, not only masks and ventilators, but something people in rich countries take for granted: oxygen.
The oxygen crisis adversely impacts the developing world. The COVID pandemic made this lack of access to oxygen visible, bringing it to the forefront of the news cycle. We have seen the pandemic take hold everywhere, and in some places the effects of the lack of access to oxygen was greater than others, such as Peru, Burkina Faso, and Brazil. We saw riots over lack of oxygen in Jordan, and people were treated on the streets and in their cars in India. Low and middle income countries were impacted by the broken oxygen ecosystem during the crisis, more so than developed countries. The existing oxygen ecosystem was struggling before the pandemic. During the pandemic, that infrastructure has virtually broken down. Oxygen was delayed when the train delivering it came to a standstill. In another instance, a truck had to be escorted by the police to get to its destination. Rural areas had the most trouble with access to oxygen. Larger cities had access to oxygen, but when the crowds came, they didn't have enough oxygen. Supply simply couldn't keep up with demand. People flocked to hospitals requiring oxygen, where they are met with an insufficient supply and a lack of capability to administer it properly. This facility in Uganda used to refill 50 cylinders a day before the pandemic. During the pandemic, that number jumped to 400 cylinders a day. Naturally, they couldn't keep up, which caused hospitals to start refilling tanks at the bedside. This then put the oxygen supply burden on clinicians, which led them away from treating patients. Access to oxygen means availability on demand across all care settings.
When I first started practicing, one of the gaps that I noticed in our health facilities was the lack of oxygen everywhere I went. It breaks your heart because you're deciding who lives and who doesn't live. And no doctor should be put in such a situation.